and thoughts about these developments. And we cross now to our reporter Julia Lyubova, who's in Russia. Julia, thank you very much for joining us. I wonder if this story is being followed quite a bit in Russia, given the relationship that South Africa and Russia enjoy in BRICS.
Well, absolutely. This story has indeed is being followed in Russia. And some of the Russian media have actually referred to Jacob Zuma as Russia's main ally in South Africa, and also referred to him as a personal ally of Vladimir Putin in some of the articles they have written about this story. There hasn't been a lot of official reaction to the news so far from the Kremlin, but no doubt that the Kremlin will be closely watching the situation unfold. Of course, Russia and South Africa are both members of the BRICS alliance, and of course both are interested, and Russia will be interested in stability of that alliance. And so indeed Kremlin will be watching this situation very closely indeed, and will be then also of course watching for any possible replacements of Jacob Zuma, and will then evaluate how to move forward. So indeed we'll be most likely hearing from the Kremlin as soon as there's a development in the story.
Julia, I guess for South Africans, one of the big sort of elephants in the room has been South Africa's nuclear ambitions or not, and Russia's name keeps coming up in that equation. How much do we know from the Russian side about just how close we got to a deal with South Africa, and if perhaps President Zuma's exit might change the equation for the nuclear story between Russia and South Africa?
Well, we don't know all the details about that nuclear deal that went on, but of course in 2014 South Africa signed an agreement with Rosatom, and Rosatom is Russia's state-owned nuclear power company, and the deal was to buy several nuclear power stations by Russia in South Africa. However, that deal was stalled because of controversy over the 76 billion US dollars price tag onto that deal. So we don't know many details exactly why it got stalled, and many details of what's happening with that deal right now. But of course for Russia, building a nuclear power station in South Africa is very important, and indeed would reaffirm ties between the two countries for Russia. That would be Russia's point of view in this nuclear deal.
You did say that the Kremlin is waiting to see if President Zuma does resign tomorrow. Will there be a reaction from President Putin?
Well, indeed, we are likely to hear from the Kremlin when and if Jacob Zuma does actually resign. And of course, like, we do know that Russia and South Africa enjoy very warm relations, and Vladimir Putin and Jacob Zuma personally have a very warm relation indeed. And of course, relations between South Africa and Russia dates back to the Soviet times, when the USSR was providing military training and arms to the African National Congress. And recently the two countries have been trying to renew their ties. They have scrapped the visa requirements for travel, and the two nations of course are members of the BRICS alliance, an economic alliance between Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. But that alliance have been moving more towards a political alliance in recent times, and certainly Russia sees Africa as a source of political support and business opportunities. So indeed Moscow will be watching the situation very closely, and we are likely to hear some kind of reaction if Jacob Zuma and when he actually resigns.
All right, Julia, perhaps one last question. The deputy president at the moment might become president, and this relationship between South Africa and Russia is between countries. I guess it's not about personalities, and maybe if Cyril Ramaphosa does take over, it will be business as usual between Russia and South Africa.
Well, of course, that remains to be seen, because for now Jacob Zuma has been the main ally of Russia up until this moment, so it depends on who the replacement will be and what his position about ties with Russia will be. But of course, South Africa is a main source of sort of business opportunities for Russia, and Russia is trying to gain more opportunities in the country. But we do know that the two countries are cooperating in intelligence and in defense. Some South African pilots are believed to have received training in Russia, and there are some collaborations in media projects between Russia and South Africa as well. But there are actually quite few South Africa-Russia business deals, and despite the visa-free regime between the two countries, there are no direct air links. So of course the two countries cooperate in the framework of the BRICS alliance, but of course it remains to be seen exactly what happens in South Africa and how Russia will react to it.
All right, Julia, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. That was our correspondent in Russia, Julia Lubyova, speaking to us there. And Lubahang saying that it's, they're going to wait and see. Kremlin will probably react in the next whatever timeline. But one last question for you. Brand ANC. They really need to manage the next 24 hours, week or so. And they don't have much time to rebrand, re-engineer, and get people to love that brand once again.
So, I mean, there are a few things that they need to do. They need to show that they're united and that they're willing to take the measures that are necessary to build a cohesive movement, and that means also being willing to deal with the internal, rot that has set in. They also need to be willing to reconstitute themselves. So, I mean, I think a lot of rethinking their policy direction and rethinking the way that they manage leadership crises such as this to avoid this happening again. And they also need to remain in touch with the South African people. And it's been a very aloof few days with very few updates about what's happening, and they need to really remember that they govern at the behest of the people of this country, and they need to really bring them back on side, and I think have a lot more humility in their approach to the people of this country.